So we'll be discussing about the after update trigger. Then I'll take some scenarios. So let me explain about after update triggers. Let me explain about after update triggers. So let me take an example. We have set of records here. We have a set of records which you are trying to update. Name, industry, and we have three records. Banking. Let us say I am taking here Wipro, banking, 1, 2, 3, Dell, energy, and we have TCS, education, and we have 1, 2. These are the records what I have in account object. Out of these records, I am planning to update 2 of the records. So I was planning to update these 2 records. Out of these 2 records, I am planning to update these 2 records. I want to modify the records into, so what are the records I want to modify? I want to modify the records of Dell, energy, 4, 5, 6, TCS, education, and the values of 1, 2, 3. Let me give. These records, I was trying to modify them into Dell, energy. I am trying to modify 2, 3, 4, TCS, energy, 4, 5, 6. So the records which are there in the object, out of those records, I was trying to modify these 2 records as Dell, energy, 2, 3, 4, TCS, energy, 4, 5, 6. These modifications I have made. Then I clicked on a button called update. When you click on a button called update, then it is going to call before update trigger. It is going to call before update trigger. This is my before update trigger. So in the before update trigger, what I was trying to do, I was trying to make some modifications on the records. The records which you are trying to modify, those records are in trigger.old. We can also refer them using trigger.old map also. You have seen what operations we can perform on trigger.old and trigger.old map. The list of records which you are trying to modify, those records with the new version of values are in trigger.new map. So we are trying to modify these 2 records as Dell, energy, 2, 3, 4, TCS, energy, 4, 5, 6. So the new set of values are in trigger.new and in trigger.new map. When you click on update, the modified values are not yet updated into database. when you click on update, before the modified values are updated into database, what I was doing, I was taking for account A trigger.new. I have taken every value from the trigger.new and I told A dot phone equal to 999. Else we have got 789. So in the before update trigger, I is writing a logic using which I want to modify the values which are in trigger.new as 789. The phone number of trigger.new records are modified as 789. Then once the before update trigger is completed, then it will save the records to the object. When you save the records to the object, same object again, after running the before update, it is going to modify the records in the database. So the modifications are updated to the database. So when the modifications are updated, so what are the final values that are saved? Once the modifications are updated, we are going to get the records. We are going to get the records in the form of AK. Wipro, banking. We have the phone number as that. What about the Dell? Dell Industries Energy. Phone number is modified as 789. So the changes that are done in the before update using trigger.new is applied on the data. TCS Energy 789. So the records are saved after update. Once the records are updated, then it is going to call after update trigger. So what is this after update trigger? Once the records are saved successfully to the database, then after update triggers are fired. So in the after update trigger, so the records which are successfully saved, those records are in trigger.new. The records which are successfully saved to the database, those records are saved in a trigger.new and in trigger.new map in trigger.new and trigger.new map in the concept of after update. Now what happened? Whatever the modifications that you have done, those are successfully updated. Now, if I write any SQL query here, select phone from account, where ID in trigger.new. When you write a SQL query in the after update, we are going to get 123 786 786. As the modifications what you have done are successfully saved to the database. In the after update, if you write any SQL query, it is going to give you set of new values which are successfully inserted. Now, as the records are successfully inserted, if you want to make any modifications, you have to write DML operations. As the records are successfully saved to the database, if you want to make any modifications, then those modifications has to be done using DML operations. Let me quickly make Let me quickly make some analysis. Which data is there in trigger.new, which data is in trigger.old, old map, all that stuff. Come back to this. Any query on this context, what I have explained as of now? Any query on this context? Any query on the context? Right. So let me go back to the trigger again. Let me explain. After update on account object. So we are making here after update. So here I was taking for account A trigger.new system.debug trigger.old a dot. I was trying to display which set of records are there in trigger.new and trigger.old. Sorry, it's a trigger.new. A dot. The same context I am using here to display the records which are there in trigger.old. I was trying to display the records which are in trigger.old. So let us see which records are in trigger.new, which records are in trigger.old. After update, what is the mistake? After update. So let me run this trigger. Go back to the account object. Let me open a testing record. So let me give you. Initially, I was giving 111. So let us see. Now, why it is getting modified? Because there is some before update trigger running. Yesterday's trigger, what we have written, it is running. So let me deactivate the trigger. I'm trying to deactivate the trigger here. Yesterday we made these modifications. Okay. All right. Come back to the record again. So what is the current value we have? C2020. I was modifying them as 1, 2, 3. I was modifying them as 1, 2, 3. So the modified value is 1, 2, 3. Old value is 2020. Save it. Once you save it, let us go to the debug log. See what are there in the trigger.old and trigger.new in the after update trigger. Let us go back to this. Here, you are able to see here. Update example is dot. Before update has filed. It's the old one, I guess. Okay. Let me take the new one. Back to debug file. So go back, check out your trigger after update, right? So we're printing the value. Go back to the object. Again recreate, check out what values we have. What is the trigger we have? Testing phone number 123, which I was modifying as 888. Go back to the log. Log file is not getting created. So we are creating value here. Save it. Now go back to the record again. Modify. Old value is 888. New value is 999. Go to this. To the log file. What we have. View the log file. Done. Check out the debug what you have given. What is the operation what we have done here? We look at this. Trigger.old testing. Phone number is 888. Trigger.old testing and old value is 888. So in the trigger.old we have testing and 888. Trigger.new, once the after update on account event is triggered, once the after update on the event is triggered, we are going to get 999 on the record. So right now the record what we have is trigger.old with 888. What is the current value we have here? 999. So the trigger.9, okay, new contains 999. So same one I was trying to understand this format. The same one I was understanding this one. If I read a SQL query and get the records, which set of records you are going to get? If I read a SQL query and display the list of records. In this trigger.old contains the old version of values, trigger.new contains new version of values which are inserted. Now what I am doing, I am trying to fetch the records. ID in. I am using trigger.old only. Even though you are using trigger.old, we are going to get a new set of values because record ID is same. Record ID of trigger.old and trigger.new is same. So go back to this. Again modify. The old values are 9999. I was modifying it to 444. Go back to the debug log again, check out which values are printed. So what we are getting here? 444. But what is the logic I have written here? I ask you to fetch the records whose ID is in trigger.code. So when you are writing a SQL query on the object, in the after update trigger, we are going to get updated values. As the modifications what you have done are already saved to the database, if you are writing a SQL query on the object, we are going to get the modified values. So if you want to make any changes, let us say I was making some change, phone equal to 1, 2, 3. I'm trying to make a changes without DML. If you try to make any changes without DML, they won't be updated. As the records are already in the database, any modification you want to do, look at the code. I'm giving us 333. Save it. What is the value you are getting here? 333. But in the trigger, what I have given here? 1 equal to 1 to 3. So the modifications what you are doing here, they are not applied, as any data that is successfully saved to the object, any data that is successfully saved to the object, any object that is successfully saved to the object, any data which is successfully saved to the object, if you want to modify them, you have to make a DML. So I am straight away writing a DML here. Let me write it outside the for loop. I am giving it update. The same. Previously you straight away made an operation. Now I am making update ACCs. Now if you make update ACCs, there is a small clause here. What is the clause? I am trying to perform update on the account object in update trigger in the account object. So what will happen? What will happen? Within the update trigger, save it. Save it. It is taking you what? Recursive trigger. What is it? Recursive, because you are calling this, the trigger is called because there is an update. Now within this trigger you are writing an update on the same object. So obviously it makes what? Recursive. If you try to make an update on the object on which you call the trigger, if you try to make an update on the record on which you call update trigger, it will make what? Recursive triggers. Recursive triggers. Right. But any changes you want to make, let us say now I want to give delete. So any changes you want to make on the record which you have inserted successfully, we have to make a DML operation. Now I'm giving here, I'll come back. Right. So the record is deleted. So any changes you want to make on the record, that has to be done using what? DML operations, as the data is already successfully saved to the database. The key point that you have to understand here is, let it be a trigger.old or trigger.new. ID of this record, 18 character ID is same in trigger.old and trigger.new. Right. So any queries as of now? Any queries as of now? So we just understood about what is the trigger.old, trigger.new, what we can do in after update trigger using trigger.old and trigger.new. So let me give you the conclusion over here. Let me give you a conclusion. After update. If we take after update trigger. It is a recursiveness. I'll discuss the topic once we are done with this. I will discuss the topic once I complete explaining this topic. Read, write, shortfall. These are the 4 operations what I have. It is after update. In after update. This is after update trigger. We are working on trigger dot. We take trigger dot new. On trigger dot new, what we can make? Can we read the data which is in trigger dot new? Yes or no? We can read the data. So it is yes. Can we make a manipulation straight away? Yes. Sockful, the modifications are not updated, so you cannot write a sockful. DML, you cannot make the DML operation on the records which are in trigger dot new. So let me make trigger dot. Is trigger dot old? Can I read the data? Yes, we can read the data. But can we write? No. Can you make sockful? Old values are already updated. Old values are updated. You cannot get the old values by writing a sockful. Even though if you write a sockful, you will get only modified values. Just now I have shown an example. So even if you write a sockful query, you will get modified values only. The same concept. Go dot old map. Trigger dot old map. Old, read, write, DML. New map, here what? Read we can make, right? It is same like your trigger dot. So this is the conclusions of trigger dot new, trigger dot old map, trigger dot new map using trigger dot new map using after update triggers. Right. Now come back to your query. Right. So look at this. Now we had a table when we have written a trigger. We have written a trigger. In the trigger, we are writing update. I have taken record 111. Wipro banking on 2. I have given before update or after update trigger, whatever it is. Update trigger. After update. Now you have fetched that record. The record on which you are inserting. The record on which you are inserting. So once you are trying to modify this record from banking to 333, then what happens? When you are trying to update, the trigger will be called. Within the trigger, what you are doing? Within the trigger, what you are doing? You are writing a software query and getting the record. Now, within the trigger, you call this. Okay. Then you are making update. When you make update A, When you are updating this record, this trigger is called. When you are running this trigger, it is saying update A. When you are updating this record, what happens? Again the trigger will be called. Again in this trigger, which trigger is called? After update trigger is called. Again within this trigger, what you are making? When you say update A, what happens? Again it will call update trigger. Again within this trigger, what is happening? So what is happening? Trigger is calling itself. When you say update A, whenever you make a update on account object, automatically it will call update trigger on account. So again the same trigger will be called. Again when you try to make update A, automatically update trigger on the account will be called, which means the next same trigger is called. Again the same trigger is called. So if a trigger calls itself, we call it as recursive. We call it as recursive. Right. We call it as recursive trigger. So, right. As the trigger is calling itself, we call it as recursive trigger. If a trigger calls itself, we call it as recursive trigger. Now, unless this trigger is completed, this won't be completed. Unless this is completed, this won't be completed. So, unless this is completed, changes are not updated. So, that is how recursive triggers will be occurring when you try to make changes on the record. Exactly. Not update DML, update on the same object. If I make a update on contact object, it will not throw. It was throwing in a recursive because the trigger of, we have done update trigger on account. When is this update trigger is called? Whenever you make any update on the account record, then only this trigger is called. So within the trigger, if you make update on any other records, it will not be an issue. Only if you make an update on account, then they will call the trigger again. Did you get my point? In this trigger, I am making some subcall query. You're writing update, but this trigger is. Just give me 1 second. Right. So when you're making an update, this trigger was written on account object. This is an update trigger. Update trigger means this trigger will call only if there is any update on the account record. But this was an update on the contact, so it won't call the trigger again. If you have written any other trigger on the contact object, suppose you have written update trigger on contact object. If you have written update trigger on contact object, if you have written any update trigger on the contact object, then this would be called. Right? Is your query clarified? Right. Recurring trigger can be resolved. Whatever the recurring trigger is there, we can resolve the issue. So when we get this type of situation, how to handle, we have a different process for that. We have a trigger handlers to handle this. I will discuss that once we move forward. Okay. Right. So let me take a quick scenario on this. So we have an account record. Whenever you are trying to modify account record, before modifications are updated to the database, we need to check amount is else annual revenue is greater than else. We need to check out. Let me give it in this way. Whenever you are trying to modify the account record, if industry is banking, then we need to throw error message, boss, you cannot modify this. Any record whose industry is banking, those records cannot be modified. If you are trying to modify any other account record whose industry is other than banking, then we need to create new contract record based on current account details. There are two things involved here. First thing is, when you try to modify, first you will check what is the industry. If industry is banking, it should throw error message, boss, you cannot modify the records whose industry is banking. If you try to modify any record other than banking, then a new contact record should be created with the modified details after the account is updated. So what I was doing here, I am trying to write an Apex class. Here. I am creating two methods, public void and passing. What was my logic? For account A, I was taking all the records. I am giving. If A dot industry equal to banking, if A dot industry equal to banking, then A dot add error, banking records cannot be modified. Right. Then I am writing one more method here, public static void after update. And after update, what I am doing, I want to create a contact records for every account. I was taking contacts. So what I was doing is, I am taking every account record based on account record, we're trying to create a new contact. So C dot account ID equal to A dot ID. As the record is successfully inserted, account is already existing record, it has an ID. C dot last name equal to A dot name. C dot phone equal to what I'm doing here. Insert. Right. So this is how I have done. So I have created an Apex class which I am going to invoke it from the trigger. There is some bug. Variable phone doesn't exist. I have to give a dot phone. So this is the logic what I have written. So what is this logic? If you call this method, it is going to check what is the value of account, what is the industry value of account, what you have passed. If industry equal to banking, throw error message. If industry is not equal to banking, process the work. Then after update, create a contact record based on account data. So I was taking this data here. So what I was be doing here, before update, I'm passing here record dot new. When should I call this? This should run when it is a before trigger. So I have to check here. Trigger dot is before and trigger dot is update. What does it mean? If it is before update trigger, trigger dot is before is going to return true if it is a before trigger. It is going to return true if it is a update. If it is a before update, this logic is going to be executed. Right. I am taking it. If trigger dot is after is update, then call this method. This is the logic what I am processing. Then, so go back to the account, take any one of the account record. If industry with the modified value the new value is banking, it's already deleted. It's a trigger which is running up. Oh. This logic actually I have to write within this. Which is an active. So I will pause here old. So any old records whose industry is banking, they cannot be modified. Here I am passing trigger dot old. Here I am passing trigger dot new. Where was the error? Oh, after update again. Name I modified. After update. So go back to the record. Account. So I was taking some record here. Now industry, there are no contacts here. I was changing to banking. So old value is not banking, new value is banking. If old value is not banking, any old record, any account record whose industry value is other than banking, then automatically create a contact. I create. Now, if we try to modify any one of the existing account record whose industry is banking, already industry is banking, which I was changing to finance. It is throwing. This is not allowed. Exception is false. Exception is false. You should not allow this. We are throwing some error message here. Right? I was throwing some error message because of which the termination has happened. Right. So this is how we are implementing triggers with the before and after. Before and after insert triggers. And before and after update triggers. So the major concept here is understanding which records will be there in trigger.old, trigger.new, and what type of operations you can perform using trigger.old and trigger.new. That is a major concept. We have to understand which records are there, what type of operations can be performed on those records. It is a major concept. Then the logics we can write according to our requirement. Logics we can write according to our requirement. So any queries on this? Any queries on this? Any queries?